Well, thank you so much for staying with us. The process that is being finalized today at the Supreme Court started with the elections, and that's what we're still expecting to happen in 3 states in this country real soon. And as you have seen there, Mr. Osage-Uzzi joins us this morning. He is the Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice in Edo State. Before this live, he was in his previous life former Director of Legal Services with INEC and also former Director of Voter Education and Publicity, also with INEC. He joins us from our Benin studio. Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning, Mr. Osage-Uzzi.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Perhaps this might be an opportunity to say congratulations on your appointment. But then, first of all, tell us what your take is on the fact that one of the things that's been said quite a number of times, that the judiciary seems to be the one electing people into office now after an election conducted by INEC, as opposed to, you know, the ballots just being the only bus stop, so to speak, through which people get into office. How do you think INEC, well, you have been in INEC, so how did INEC react to such things when you were in office, and what do you think is happening right now within the confines of INEC?
Well, thank you. First of all, we should recognize the fact that there's a dispute resolution mechanism embedded in our legal framework of elections. So conduct of elections does not stop with the casting of the ballots, the counting of those ballots, and announcements of results. It also entails the post-election procedure, that there are likely to be aggrieved persons. Each time you conduct an election, there are likely to be some aggrieved persons. And those aggrieved persons should be offered the opportunity of ventilating their grievances. And the way of doing that, the civilized way of doing that, is to deploy the mechanism set up in the Electoral Act, and that is by way of petition to the relevant tribunal. INEC recognizes this, and so plans towards this generally, and it has a legal department, a well-staffed legal department with several senior advocates of Nigeria and lawyers, as well as retaining, having a retinue of other lawyers who are prepared to defend the elections when the post-election procedure now ensues. So it's that realization, and in this era, a lot of cases also come in the pre-election stage, and that's an indicator that even in the post-election stage, it should be prepared. So, and in each of these cases, INEC is joined as a respondent or a defendant. So, in a sense, the Commission is used to this and prepares towards it. The number of cases might be a reflection of how well or how poorly the elections were conducted, but it could also be a reflection of how litigious the country is, the politicians are, because right from even pre-election time, election petitions have gained traction. And in recent times, there are so many, almost every election challenged by way of a petition. The merits or otherwise of it's a different issue. I agree that perhaps the judiciary should not play as prominent a role as it does in our electoral process, both in the pre-election phase and the post-election phase. A lot of things are left to be determined by the judiciary, whereas primarily it's the votes that should count. But there's always dispute as to who should be voted for, whether that person was actually voted for. That is the role of judiciary to settle.
For you, would you say, I know we'll come to other details of the issues at hand, but for you, would you say, okay, maybe I should ask it more directly. What do you think is the reason for our litigious nature, as you said, especially for elections? Why is it difficult, in your opinion, for whatever the processes say to just stand, as opposed to being contested almost every time? I mean, there is hardly any election that is not, any level of election that is not contested. In your opinion, what do you think is responsible for that? And is there anything we can do to make us less litigious, especially concerning elections?
Well, honestly, I think it's a factor, there are several factors at play here. Some people will say it's a badly conducted election is likely to lead to several litigations. That's to an extent true. Faith in the system is low. So there's a historical aspect of it that, look, in the past, people have felt hard done by the conduct of INEC. First of all, when elections don't follow these laid down procedures, don't follow the regulations, don't follow the law, they are bound to be challenged. There's the other school of thought that will say that, look, politicians are sour losers, they're sore losers. They don't like losing, and to keep a tonic for the troops, as I may describe it, to keep people hoping. And they say, look, let us go to the tribunal. We shall return with victory in the tribunal because these elections run foul of the legal provisions. So it's a bit of both. In the last general elections, there was a lot of faith in technology. There was a lot of faith in the result viewing portal, the IREV, as advertised by INEC, as propagated by CSOs, INEC, and everybody, because in the off-cycle elections, especially in Edo, Ondo, Osun, we had seen the role that IREV had played. We had seen the confidence it had built in the system. So when you now come to general elections and this is not done the way you had promised, the way you had assured, naturally, people will be disappointed. People want to challenge that. What is the legality of that process you now adopted? Why did you not stick strictly to the provisions of the law, of your regulations, and your promises made to Nigerians? So naturally, people will challenge that. And look, a lot of these provisions are new. We had the card reader, and that was challenged all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, no, the card reader was not part of the electoral law. The process for accreditation is sticking of the register. It's a manual process. So by the time the technology was now introduced in the form of not card reader or any other technological device, which is the phrase used by the Electoral Act, uprising. People believe that, yes, things will be done differently, and now technology will play a more preeminent role rather than manual manipulation, which was the bane of previous cycle. So people believed in that. When this did not happen, naturally, people felt aggrieved, and they said, look, we'll have to challenge this. And the fervor, the passion, the fervor endangered by the promises made by INEC spurred people on. A lot more people, especially first-time voters, now went to register, now voted, and they believe that votes will count. A lot of them feel aggrieved that our votes did not count because you did not live up to your promises. So naturally, people who are aggrieved will challenge that. So a lot of these new provisions had to be challenged so that we'll get judicial pronouncements on them.
Well,
but as I said, yes.
My apologies for butting in, Mr. Osage-Uzzi. You've listed quite a number of things, and I think I'm able to pick 4. You talked about the process of the election itself. You talked about the lack of faith in our systems by the people. You talk about the roles that politicians play, and you've also mentioned technology. I'd like you to disaggregate 1 or 2 of them. When you talk about the process, for instance, are you essentially talking about the umpire, the person of INEC, that organizes this election? From your experience and from what you know now about INEC, what is missing? You have also spoken about the fact that people have lost faith in the system. INEC is the system largely right now. A number of issues that we also raised yesterday about the level of trust that has been lost and the fact that INEC doesn't seem to be either able to or doing anything to restore that loss of trust or confidence in it. We'll come to the technology angle in a bit. But what do you think INEC is missing or has missed over time that needs to be restored so that we can restore confidence in the process? Because as Marquez said about the Senate yesterday, the Senate is the only one we have. INEC is the only one we have. If there is no trust in the system, if there is no trust in whatever INEC does, then it means people will never, at some point, want to come out anymore to vote.
You're quite right. INEC is the only electoral body for conduct of state and federal elections that we have. Of course, we have the 36 state independent electoral commissions, PX for the local government elections, but that's another different kettle of fish. The truth is that over the years, faith has been eroded. But in the period 2022 to 2023, I think that INEC was riding on the crest. People believed. And by the way, it's not only INEC that is responsible for the electoral process. We must look at things carefully and look, what are the malpractices? There's talk of the security agencies and other stakeholders, a role that they play in the electoral process. Let's talk about money, the influence, negative influence of money in terms of voter inducement, inducement of security agents, inducement of INEC officials to do the wrong thing. So all those things are also there. So let's not lose sight of that. But as for INEC, I think the greatest challenge that we have in our electoral process now is how we can rebuild trust and confidence in the process and in the institution. For the off-cycle elections, the November 11th elections in Kogi, Bayelsa, and Imo may help to restore some level of confidence, but I think Nigerians are quite skeptical about things. The off-cycle elections generally tend to do better. We saw what happened in the off-cycle elections leading up to the 2023 general elections. So even if there's a redemption there, it's quite possible that people say, well, those are off-cycle elections, wait for the general elections. But I talked to partners in civil society and said, look, we must ensure and we must try to rebuild trust and rebuild confidence. But it's not really up to civil society. INEC on its part must do a lot in that regard. Whether Nigerians will trust the commission as presently constituted on that issue, but it's more than just a change of personnel. I think there's need for a deep-rooted reflection on the process itself, on the electoral framework as well, legal framework, because these are the things. Sometimes INEC is hamstrung by the framework which has to operate. So we must look at these things very, very carefully. INEC must go out of its way to try to rebuild and that trust and that confidence. It will take a while, no doubt about that. But transparency cannot be opaque in its operations. It must be transparent. It must continue to engage. I saw that this week it's engaging stakeholders, but I think there's need to engage wider stakeholders. But I'm sure everybody's waiting for the Supreme Court to give a decision and other tribunals, and they know how to proceed therefrom.
Well, we took some issues up with the chairman of IPAC yesterday, Mr. Yabagi Sani, and one of the issues myself and my colleagues were asking him, look, INEC, as far as the most electorates are concerned, INEC did them in. And the opinion that we were holding yesterday was, look, shouldn't INEC come out and take responsibility for the fact that some things didn't work well as far as the technology it promised are concerned? We'll come to the personnel issue that you raised earlier. You know, do you think INEC should, because when you talk about engagement of the people, that INEC should continue to engage. That's the reason this question is coming up at this time. As far as people are concerned, INEC did them in not because the IRF didn't work as expected or as promised by INEC itself. And so it would seem like INEC is just taking us for a ride. No one is apologizing. No one is explaining anything to us. Shouldn't, in your opinion, INEC come out and say, we take responsibility for this, we apologize, we'll do better next time?
Absolutely. I think there's no doubt in that at all. First of all, there has to be an admission on the part of the Commission that it could not deliver as promised. And that explanation we followed with a more robust explanation about what really happened. Why did things not work out the way they said they would? I think part of the constraint may be the fact that there are still live issues in the sense that the tribunals, the courts are still looking at what happened. And I believe they don't want to get into a position where whatever is said now will be used in the tribunal or in the courts of law. But that said, I think it's imperative that the Commission should come out and offer not just an apology, but an explanation as to why things did not go. For now, both in the tribunal and publicly, INEC has said that there are technical glitches. But I think the extent of those glitches, the nature of those, and what really transpired will probably have to be explained to the public. Whether the Nigerians believe what explanation offered by INEC is a different kettle of a fish, because a lot of people just believe it's sabotage, it was done deliberately, and many of them have closed minds. They're not prepared to be persuaded by any other explanation or fact. Some people will even ask that a more independent assessment or analysis should be done as to what happened. Who will do that is a different issue. Recall that following the 2007 elections and disputes arising therefrom, the president, the prime beneficiary of that system, came out publicly and said, look, this was flawed, it wasn't perfect, and then set up the Ways panel. And people believe that. People saw a sincerity. I don't know if the president and the primary beneficiaries of what happened in 2023 come out and did that, whether we'll have the same trust and confidence in them. It's wrong for them to just go and do that. No, well, this election was good, it was perfect. I don't think the majority of Nigerians believe that it was. In certain regards, it went on extremely well. But for a lot of people, a lot of citizens, the most important part was the transparency in the result transmission process. And if that was opaque, if that was not done, then every other thing you did, no matter how well intended, no matter how well conducted, the very fact that that which you promised so much, which people leveraged on and came out, the fact that that did not work well, it negates everything else. You know,
okay. My apologies. I thought you already landed on that particular point. But you take on one or two other issues about personnel and the entire system, the way it runs, as you have suggested. When we come back from this break, please stay with us. Thank you so much for staying with us. Well, Mr. Osage-Uzzi is still with us this morning. Well, Mr. Osage-Uzzi, you talked about the system, and every system is made up of people, INEC no less. Now, the process of getting people into INEC, I mean, as resident electoral commissioners or as national commissioners, that's something that's been in the news as well. What, in your opinion, is the propriety of national commissioners or even resident electoral commissioners of INEC being appointed by the president? Of course, we know that the president has just appointed another set of about 9 INEC national commissioners and INEC resident electoral commissioners. In your opinion, what's the propriety of that? How significant is that in imbuing strength or trust in the system?
Yes, well, in a particular climb, there is a lot of misapprehension regarding the neutrality of the appointing authority, in which, in this case, the president's country. We should note that the president does not act alone. He acts in consultation with the National Council of State in some of these appointments. But I think most people are not too comfortable with it. It's important to draw attention to the fact that in other countries, it's not unusual to have a president who's the politician appoints these categories of people. But in our own context and in our own country, that generates a lot of controversy, and we think that it affects the independence of the appointees. Once a person appoints you, you are beholden to that person. You're not supposed. The Constitution says you shouldn't be. You should be impartial. You should deal with your stakeholders impartially and without prejudice, and you should be non-partisan. But most of us don't believe that when they get into that office that they can possibly be. For a long time now, we have recommended that the president electoral commissioners should not be political appointees, but should be career officers who should grow through the ranks and who should be answerable to the commission. Although the law seems to imply that they should be answerable to the commission, but we know in practice, it seems that many of them seem to be answerable to the appointing authorities and do the bidding of the appointing authorities. And even if they don't, I think Nigerians just feel that independent body or person to the appointment. Unfortunately, when people say this, they refer. We're not too. The suggestions are not too concrete as to which body should now do the appointing. And when you look critically at some of the suggestions, for example, like the NJC, National Judicial Council, you find out that the National Judicial Council has indirect linkages to the president. The president, for example, appoints the Chief Justice of Nigeria, who sits as chairman of that council. People tend to forget that. Quite a number of members of the NJC, like Dr. are actually appointed by the same president that you are trying to run away from. Some people say Parliament should do that, but Parliament consists, National Assembly consists of politicians. So do you remove appointing authority from one politician and vest it in other politicians? People say an independent body. How do you constitute that independent body? These are practical challenges that we must look into. In the Scandinavian countries, electoral commissions don't conduct elections. Very often, it's local governments, like in England as well. The electoral commission does not actually conduct elections. In the United States, the electoral commission, its duty doesn't include conduct of elections. So these are some of the issues we should look at. And the quality and caliber of people we appoint is so very important. As for resident electoral commissioners, I think we can afford to do away with them being political appointees, being appointed by the president. But as for the national commissioners and the chairman, if we are to get another appointing authority, we must ensure that it's a bit independent, and we must ensure that it has no linkages, direct or otherwise, to the president. But I don't know which body can do that now that does not have direct linkages to the president of the Federal Republic. That's it.
Very interesting. I mean, I'm happy that IO is taking that trajectory with you in terms of looking at the type, well, not just the appointing body, but also the people that are being appointed. And that raises the question as to, well, it's one thing for the president to appoint, but it's also because he has to do this with approval of the National Assembly. So the Recs, they are going, this newly appointed 10 resident electoral commissioners, they still have to be appointed, or beg your pardon, confirmed by the Senate. Isn't that correct?
Quite correct. The process is such that after consultations with the National Council of States, it goes to the president. The president now nominates these people and sends them to the Senate for confirmation. And although the Senate has not always lived up to its responsibility in doing this, but to be fair to the previous Senate, once or twice we have seen that they've rejected a few nominees of the president. So I think that should be emphasized, that they should be more careful, as Professor Jiga said a few days ago. I think we should be more careful about the screening process. We'll be more thorough about the screening process and not just take a bow and go. I think perhaps the voice of the people should be heard more. People should not just complain, but they should petition, they should back that petition with affidavit and real evidence as to the suitability or otherwise of each nominee. These are people that come from our society, so we should know them well. If they're partisan or they're not fit to be so appointed as umpires, as impartial arbitrators in the electoral process, then the Senate should take that conflict and ensure that those people do not get the confirmation. And due diligence should be done by the security agents, by the presidency, and by the Senate itself. We should be more thorough about that. And don't forget, for example, that President Goodluck Jonathan appointed Professor Jiga, as chairman. And he subsequently said he didn't really know him, but he did his due diligence and felt that this was a man that could hold forth. Posterity has judged and will judge how good each and every chairman of the commission has been since its establishment.
Indeed, which raises questions as to how these names even come up in the very first instance. Of course, a president cannot know everybody whom he nominates into positions. I mean, I'm sure some of them will come through recommendations, but then you would think that by now there would be a statutory body or at least some internal mechanism within the presidency which vets some names, so that, because it kind of comes out as a scandalous position sometimes when you hear that people that have been nominated are card-carrying members of political parties in a situation where they're supposed to be umpires, where they're supposed to be neutral. Do you think that this is becoming rather necessary, maybe not just for electoral positions, but also for electoral positions, I mean electoral umpires, but also for other positions in general with whom the president might choose to nominate, or which the president might choose to nominate people to? Do you think that internal processes within the presidency ought to be more institutionalized for the nomination of people's names to certain positions?
Perhaps so, but I think there's also need for some level of flexibility. And I'd like to separate the position of umpires, like judges and members of the Independent National Electoral Commission, because they are supposed to be non-partisan and different from, say, a person might be partisan and have competences in, say, Electricity Regulation Commission or any of these other statutory bodies for which the president has the discretion and they can spread patronage in that regard. So if a party member is competent in that way, by all means, they can be appointed and have the requisite experience. But in terms of judiciary and for INEC, I think that we should be there should both flexibility, but at the same time there should be minimum standards that have to be met by the presidency. Prior to now, I'm aware that governors usually send names, nominate people to the presidency. And don't forget, I think it was the second or third alteration that removed the necessity for them being card-carrying members of the political parties. Prior to now, to the amendment to the Constitution, you had to qualify. Qualification for a national commissioner meant that you had to be qualified to contest as a member of the House of Representatives. The primary thing there was the fact that you had to be a carrying member of a political party. And that has been removed from the Constitution. But you see, it's because of the role these people will play, and they're going to deal with so many political parties, that it's necessary for a more thorough screening exercise to be undertaken before these people are appointed. Some people draw comparisons with what happens in other jurisdictions like South Africa, where you indicate you parliament, there's advertisements, and people indicate that they are willing to. But I don't know whether that is ideal in our circumstance, but maybe it's something we can try. But the president has to be more, his handlers have to be more diligent in screening the people that they wish to have. I know that, for example, Justice Akpata, the first and pioneer chairman of Independent National Electoral, was actually recommended by a former colleague in the Supreme Court, the former Chief Justice of Nigeria. He told me this himself. Recommended him and said, look, if you want an impartial person, a fair-minded person, I think the person you should go for is Justice Ifeoma Akpata. And that's how Justice Akpata became chairman of Independent National Electoral. But that was a military regime. I think the head of state then consulted, and in his consultations, the name kept coming up, and that's how he was appointed. A different things to apply with the political class. I wish we could go back to that where a body, I don't know whether you can institutionalize that, to go through the CVs and go through the antecedents and offer the public opportunity of commenting on those who are being nominated for this position before they're actually appointed.
The reason I have said that, we've seen also, I mean, this is not even, has nothing to do with the recent nominations of this resident electoral commissioners. We've also seen the withdrawal of some nominations to some other political positions in recent times. And some people will say, look, it ought not to have been. And then you should also follow the controversy with the appointment of the EFCC chairman and how lawyers have been on both sides of the divide as to whether or not he was qualified, etc., etc. But I'm looking at what has also happened in this last elections, especially with the situation in Adamawa State, where we saw a resident electoral commissioner, will I say, not on the same page with the returning officer in his state, and, you know, trying to usurp that position. I know that matter is in court now, and INEC says they're prosecuting him. But this situation came up in the last election. I don't think it was envisaged. Do you think that going forward, it was for you, when you saw what happened in Adamawa, as somebody who has been a part of the institution of INEC for many years, first, what was your thinking, and how do you think such a scenario can be safeguarded in the future?
Well, you said that the matter is already in court, so we have to be very careful about comments we make. But quite honestly, I was a bit flabbergasted when I saw what was happening, and when some of the facts came out that the resident electoral commissioner is alleged to have usurped those powers. Prior to now, in the old Electoral Act, I think it was 2002, the resident electoral commissioners were returning officers for those elections, for governorship elections, so they could make those announcements. But for quite a number of years, that position has changed, and the power was given to the commission, INEC, in Abuja, to appoint returning officers. And once you appoint a returning officer, he has all the powers to do everything concerning the elections and making the announcements. And usually, they work hand in glove with the resident electoral commissioner. The resident electoral commissioner in the state office is supposed to assist the returning officer in discharging his duties. But once he is appointed, he takes over everything. He can disregard directives, he can disregard instructions from the resident electoral commissioner. He's not obliged to. He can listen to advice, but the resident electoral commissioner just more or less is a support staff. I mean, use that word staff. He's a support person in the process in assisting the returning officer to do his job. The returning officer's role is spelled out in the law, clearly spelled out, and he takes the final decision about scores, about returns, for fulfillment of all legal necessities to make a person, to declare a person elected. So that is his duty, that is his role, and no other person can take on that responsibility. So it's only for the presidential election where you have the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission who is declared the returning officer. That's clearly spelled out. But apart from that, all other officials of INEC are supposed to support and ensure that the returning officer does his job. It's not for anybody. And the situation was envisaged. That's why the Electoral Act stated clearly what role each person should play and what consequences there should be.
All right, Mr. Uzzi, pardon me to jump in. I just ask you. I know that last year, good to see you again. I know that last year, September, Mr. Fadana had also spoken to, I think he was trying to remind the president at the time, President Buhari, on the condition precedent before appointing Rex. You know, he cited section 153, so I beg your pardon, 1543 of the Constitution, which has to do with appointment of chairman and members. And so I'm wondering, I don't know if this was done, we need to double check, but do you know if there was any consultation with the Council of State before this announcement, this 10-man list was published?
Well, I'm not aware of that factual situation, but especially for chairman and national commissioners, it is it's a prerequisite. Must consult with the National Council of States. There must be a meeting of the National Council of States in which this matter is brought up. Invariably, it sails through, but at least the Constitution says you should consult with the National Council of States. I don't know factually whether this was done this time around or not.
Okay. All right. Just one more thing. I need to find out from you, because last time we talked about the perception of INEC and what people would expect them to do moving forward, especially with regard to the forthcoming Bayelsa, Imo, and Kogi elections. Different people think, well, they need to come clean to the people, let them know they made mistakes and they intend to correct it this time around. So having been an insider yourself, how do those things work? Does the commission usually feel they owe the people some sort of at least explanation or at least methods to adopt before they move forward, either by way of apology or explanation or something, in order to garner and improve or shore up public confidence with the commission?
In answering that, let me just state that the commission consists of the chairman and the 12 national commissioners. That is the commission. So staff, directors, and other categories of staff are the administrative support staff of the commission. And very often, of those 13 members may be a bit different from those of the other 15,000 and something or 10,000 staff. But it's not always unanimous. There are those who feel that, look, we've not done too well. We think we should apologize and seek redemptive measures to win back confidence. But there are some folks who say, no, look, this matter is in court. Anything we say now will be maybe used against us, and they are, quote unquote, those who are opposed to us or our enemies will exploit whatever we say now. And I noticed that many state institutions are always very reluctant to admit failings or admit where things have gone awry or faulty. It's not a common thing around here, because the next time you admit, maybe there will be consequences and say, well, I haven't admitted this, perhaps you should resign or step aside. For whatever reasons, there's been that hesitation or hesitance on the parts of state institutions always admit. But to an extent, INEC has tried to, in the past, has always tried to say, look, yes, we did not do things as well as they could, as we could have, and to move on, let us show some remorse, as it were. But that is not so easy to come by. But
all right,
if that's what it takes to rebuild trust, then it has to do that.
Okay, we hear you. But just to let our viewers know that, after we highlighted some things in the morning, we don't know if it's a coincidence, in the manner of speaking. Some journalists have been allowed access to the premise inside the court. So we're trying to see now if we will be able to bring you at least some reports about the proceedings of the court, which will be supposed to be by 9 o'clock. So we'll see how much of that we can bring you. But they've allowed them further access from where they were previously in the court. So we expect some news and updates from us here at Channel. So you do well to keep it locked here to get details of the forthcoming presidential election petition case at the Supreme Court. And several other people have arrived there in the court, the Labour Party, the APC, the national chairman of the APC. We understand Mr. Nuhu Ribadu, the NSA, also has arrived at the premises of the court. So activity has picked up, as they all expect that they will just be there. So that is the chairman of the national chairman of the APC. You also see the NSA, all there. So activities are just picking up. Indeed,
and we've been given approval to record the proceedings of the court. So indeed, our cameras will be allowed into the court premises, not just the premises, into the courtroom, to be able to record what exactly is happening. We certainly will be bringing you as much as we can. Now, whether that means that we will be allowed to take it live is another kettle of fish, but I would imagine that from time to time we should be able to tell viewers what has happened in the court at the Supreme Court today, as it's Judgment Day.
Yes, that's the way it should be. Think about the people when taking some of those decisions. That's why we are here on behalf of the people. Mr. Uzzi, congratulations being the AGF in Edo State and Commissioner for Justice. And thank you for at least getting here this morning. I've been in studios. I hope you enjoyed your session there this morning.
Thank you, Chamberlain. Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, then. All right, so there you go. Do we have some feedback coming through? Let's see.
Well, I know they'll be streaming in much later today, Chamberlain. Everybody's given their own expectations. But we had quite a few yesterday which we couldn't take. But time again is not our friend.
Oh, yeah. So we need to get to the courts and find out what is going on. Can't wait to see some activity, just going on there. So I guess that's the show today. We do thank you all for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow. Remember, we're going to bring you some proceedings here on the courts. I'm Chamberlain, so goodbye.
Indeed. So keep it locked here. The show is over, but not over. Thank you for watching Sunrise this morning. I'm Maokwe Ogun-Yusuf.
Maybe it's safe to say that the show is going on right now at the Supreme Court. So keep it locked here. I'm Aya Makinde. Have a wonderful rest of your day.